You're listening to Within Tolerance podcast, a podcast for machinists by machinists. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson at Purdy Machining. And this week, the episode, long delayed, I am really happy to welcome Amish Solanki of SS CADCAM. Welcome, Amish.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Finally, after, I think it's probably been 2 months here that we've been trying to schedule this in. So,
hey, I'm really excited to talk to you though. And so for people, I think most of my listeners have probably seen you on Instagram or, a video on YouTube or something. But for those who haven't, who are you? What do you do? What does your company do? All the good stuff.
Yeah. So my name is Amish Solanki, and I run SS CADCAM, and we're predominantly a job shop located in Squamish, British Columbia in Canada. And small shop. It's really just myself. Actually, I have my first full-time employee who's been with me now for almost a full year. In June will be a full year. But yeah, we're pretty small shop.
Very cool. Well, let's get into your backstory then. How did you come to own your own shop? And, for people who have seen your NYC CNC tour, you've got, a really nice DMG 5-axis, a really giant Haas.
Yeah.
How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so it actually all starts from my father. He was pretty much a machinist almost all his entire life. And when I was originally born in Alberta, in a small town called Lethbridge. And from there, my father got a job down in New Zealand, working for a shop. So we pretty much got up and moved everything down to New Zealand and lived there for about 11 months. It didn't quite work out, just what the company he was working for. I believe the owner actually passed away, and the son took over and didn't run it quite well. So my dad got a job offer out here on the West Coast in Canada, came up and decided to do that. So we moved up here. And throughout all that, he worked at a bunch of different shops, fairly large shops, big union shops, 200, 300, 400 employees. Moved into a shop that did a lot of predominantly aerospace work. And then this is right before, probably about a year or two before 9/11. He was commuting quite far, almost like an hour and a half away, and just kind of had enough of that and decided to just start his own shop. So he bought his first machine, and that was the VF7 that's in my shop as of today. So that's I believe it's a 1999 VF7, and it's running as I speak right now. My employee is there right now, which is great. So he bought that machine and started his own shop around 2000. And I was living at home at the time. I was 20 years old, and my dad was like, why don't you come and kind of work for me? I had a separate job somewhere else that was part-time, so I just went to the shop and started kind of learning from him. And so I worked with him for about 8 years. Primarily, I was kind of the shop rat. So I knew the tooling, setup, running parts, but I never really dealt with customers. I never did any programming. I just pretty much ran the shop. We had the VF7. We had I think we had a Bridgeport back then. We had a manual lathe, which still actually have to this day. And then maybe about a year or two after that, we bought one of the Haas VF. I think it was the VF1 or VF2, the little space capsule, like the OG ones, kind of.
Okay.
So we bought one of those that we got, and we had that in the shop, and that was great, except it had no chip conveyor on it. And I continued working with him, but my dad at the time was very comfortable where the company was and wasn't really willing to kind of progress the company. Look, it put a food on the table, house over, his head and so forth. But he was kind of happy where it was, and I just didn't quite see kind of a future there. And it was hard for me to push where the company was. I was very, clean and organized, put things back, and then, I'd come back and there's tools everywhere. And if you can't find a tool, he'll just go buy another one and so forth. So, and you work with your dad, you butt heads and so forth. But, we had a great working relationship. But again, I didn't see a future there. And photography was actually a hobby of mine. And around, 2005, 2006, digital cameras were becoming, SLRs were coming out more and more. So I got my first then and started getting jobs doing photography, primarily getting into the wedding industry. And so here I am working for my dad. You work, for your dad, you work overtime during the weekdays, even on the weekends, but then I'm shooting weddings on the weekends. And then I come home from work on the weekdays, and then I'm editing photos, and it was just crazy. And it just got to a point where just trying to do both was really difficult. So I just told my dad in 2008, when actually I got married, I think I want to progress into doing the photography full time. And my dad was awesome. He was like, you know what, whatever you want to do, you do that at the time. And so I actually left machining probably in around 2008, 2009. I kind of slowly left. It was, still helping on production jobs and so forth. But for the most part, I was kind of done and proceeded into doing photography and cinematography. And I did that up until about 2013. And my dad was, probably around 63 at the time. And he was getting ready to retire. He always kind of wanted to retire at 65. And he had found another shop in the same complex that was willing to take over his company. He was actually training the new shop, training them to kind of become machinists and so forth. And they were going to take over the company. And then he moved actually his shop into their shop, still operating as two different companies. And beginning of like 2014, just healthy his entire life, boom, got brain cancer right away. And
my goodness.
It's funny how it's not funny, but it hit him. My dad was, granted 64 at the time, still working in the machine shop, moving big 8-inch curved vices, tough guy, and went down to about 120 pounds. And so when he found out eventually he had to go for brain surgery, it was, high risk surgery. So I was the only family member that really ever worked kind of at the shop for a long period of time. So my dad was kind of like, company's yours, sell it, run it, do whatever you want. I'm kind of done at this point. And, my mom was already just too distraught and just dealing with my dad and so forth. And I had already spent about a month or two while he was in the hospital, just back in his shop, just trying to wrap my head around things, trying to get any of the jobs that were still on the floor out and so forth. From picking away for almost 6 to 7 years. And then after, we kind of put the shop in my name, I thought, okay, well, what do I do here? Like my parents were still kind of relying on the income. And I said, well, let me give it a go here. So I just realized I couldn't do that in the shop with this other business. So right. I had to move it. And across the road in the same complex was a fab shop. They had been our neighbors for the last 15 years and they had 2 bays. They didn't really need the other bay. So the owner, who was the son who had taken over from his father, was like, do you want to take over this bay? And I said, yeah, let me do it. So I moved in and kind of got that fresh start where I finally got to epoxy my floors, even though I did it all by myself. I painted all the walls. I've left the city now. I did all the electrical myself. I did all the airlines, pretty much everything. Like I ran it all myself because I just really didn't have the income to do it all. So I did all that summer, moved the machines in. And at the time, we also had a VF4, a newer VF4 as well that my dad had got while I was away. And I was like, perfect, I've got these 3 machines and I have no idea how to program these machines. So opened up his computer that he had and he had an old version of Mastercam on it. And I opened it up and I'm like, yep, no, I'm pretty computer savvy. I built my own computers. I know my software and so forth. But I was just like, from not really programming to open up Mastercam, there's 50,000 icons on the screen. Yes. I said, there's got to be something better in the time that I've been away. So I started searching online and I had come across HSM Express, which was, I believe, turning into Fusion 360. And that's when I decided to, downloaded Fusion 360 at the time. I think it had just come out of beta, maybe about a year or so prior to that.
Okay, and, so it wasn't like Fusion and Cam 360. It was right after they merged.
Yeah, exactly. It was right after they merged. Okay. The Autodesk channel, I believe, only had around 30 videos on Fusion 360, and that was it. I mean, you go on YouTube now, and you will find thousands and thousands and thousands of videos. There was 30. I specifically remember there's only 30 videos on there, but I just watched it all over a weekend and went on a Monday, and I ran my first program. And I was like, this is actually pretty easy. And it was a basic 2D program, but I was like, this is easy. And so by the end of the week, I'm like, all right, let's try some 3D surfacing, RAS 3D surfacing. I'm like, why is this stuff so difficult? Like, it just seems so much difficult in the past. And this has made it a lot easier. And then, Instagram was kind of becoming a big thing then, or at least that's when I kind of got involved and posted a couple parts on it and got connected with Kaching. From Autodesk, Kaching, and Curtis Chan at the time.
Yeah.
And so we chatted for a bit and they're like, dude, we want to come out and see you. I'm like, you guys want to come up like here? Like, 'cause they're down in I think Kachin was still in Portland, but Curtis was down in California. Yeah, we'll come up and see you. So they flew up, and that was one of the first. They were doing these kind of like customer success stories.
I was just watching, or I watched the very beginning. You know, I asked you before we recorded, like, oh, how do you pronounce your name? And I heard Kurt do it, and I was like, well, you know, he could have gotten it wrong too. I'll just ask, you know.
And if Kurt listened to this, he butchered my last name right at the end of that one, but he knows about that. So, yeah, so they came up. It was great. You know, they got to see everything we were doing. And it was really interesting just finding a company that's willing to actually like to do that, to come and fly up and speak to customers. I just never kind of got that feeling from any software kind of in the past. Like when I did my photography and cinematography, I used Adobe. Like I doubt Adobe would send someone up to come and, you know, speak to like just kind of a nobody. So that was really neat. And then through that made my contacts kind of with some of the rest of the Autodesk team. That would have been, so that was, I believe, 2015. And then I think it was either that year or the next year when a bunch of us went down to IMTS. And that's when I started kind of meeting, you know, Saunders, Grimsmo. I think I met Ken Spalding then. Geez, too many people to kind of name. Seth, actually, I met Seth there as well for the first time. Devin Dupuy, met him there. So it was really neat just meeting like a whole bunch of similar kind of minded people there. But in 2015, I went to Toronto for a trade show, CMTS, which is kind of like our version, Canada's version of IMTS. It's very small. It's not even some level, but
I've seen Grimsmo's videos on it, and it's it's like
small.
one of the halls of
exactly.
IMTS.
Barely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 3D printing hall that's down, you know, on level 10. Yeah. So we went, so I went there, you know, my in-law lived out in Toronto. So I went out there, and it was the first time I met Grimsmo at the show as well. We met up there and walked the shop floor. And at that time I'd been, you know, this was September 2015. And so I'd been running kind of the company for about a year, and just with the 3-axis machines. And a lot of the work was fairly low volume, you know, 3+2 type of work, just multiple setups on parts. But yeah, just, you know, parts that needed 4 or 5 setups. And I realized at the time, like, I even realized it back when I worked with my dad. I'm like, because 5-axis machines were out back then, but not as much as see now. I'm like, we got to get a 5-axis. We got to 5. And my dad's like, no, it's too expensive. So anyways, I went out to CMTS, and I'd only ever known Haas. I went to the Haas booth right away, and they had their UMC 750. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing's at real. This is so wicked. And they're, you know, got this part of their machine. And I started walking around the shop floor, and then you start going into other booths. And then you start going into, you know, to like the Matsuura booth, and you go to Okuma booth, and you go into like the DMG booth. And it's just like, holy, look at these machines. And I walked into the DMG booth, and the first machine was the monoblock that I had, the 65 monoblock. And I walked up to it, and I just looked at this machine, and it's got this big automotive part, full 5-axis. It's just like, oh, this thing's wild. And the sales rep came up to me. His name was Tim, and he's like, you know, what do you think? And I'm like, this thing's awesome. I'm like, I can never afford this. And he's like, try me. I'm like, this thing's well over $1 million. And he's like, oh, not even close to that. I'm like, it has to be $1 million. I know what the Haas costs, and this is like the Porsche of the industries. You know, I'm like, this got to be. And he's like, nope. And there was another technical sales rep there as well. A younger guy named Christian Hauser, who was from DMG Germany, and he was with DMG Canada for kind of a 2-year contract or so. And spoke to him for a little bit and left the show. And then I decided to go back the next day. And I went back the next day, and I ended up back at the DMG booth just because I was just so mesmerized with this machine. And sales rep came up to me and said, you know, you're here again. And I was 35 at the time. And so he said, why don't you come to our open house? We have an open house in February out in Germany. Come out to that.
Oh, wow.
So I said, really? And he goes, yep. He goes, you know, it's like, I don't know, something like $1,500 you pay. They take care of everything, your flights, hotels. I'm like, I went home and, you know, spoke to my dad, and my dad's like, you know, he was at this point, like retired now and kind of done with the company. And he was like, yeah, you should totally go to that. And so I said, sure, I'll go to it. So I went out to Germany, and it's funny, when I left, my wife was like, don't come back with machine. And so I go to the show, and the best part about Fronten is, and Fronten is in south part of Germany, where a lot of their DMG makes a lot of their 5-axis, a lot of the dual blocks, the mono blocks. They're larger. I believe that larger gantries are built out there. It's, if you've never been, it is unbelievable factory to go and see. but all the Canadian customers are kept at one hotel. And the bigger thing I got than all the show was in the evenings or just walking around with these other customers. And most of the other customers for DMG are for out east, big automotive shops, running big molds for the car industries. Some of these guys are running molds that run for 3 weeks straight on a machine for a single part. It's just mind-boggling to hear what they're doing. And at the time, they had a show special on the monoblock, and these customers said, "Is there a lot of 5-axis mills out kind of where you are?" There are, but not a whole lot that you hear in job shops, especially at the time. I mean, even stout now, there's not a whole lot, but at the time, I didn't know anyone who really had one. And all of these customers were like, "You should get this machine. It's like the price is unreal. You should get this machine." Like, they're kind of asking where I'm at and what I want to do with the company and how I'm trying to progress it more from just being like a 3-axis shop. I'm like, get that machine. So I came home and spoke to the boss, my wife, and I said, "Hey, so I want to buy this machine."
Right.
And she's like, I always say she's like this, the book smarts and I'm the street smart. So she was like, "What's your business plan?" I'm like, "I don't have a business plan. I just want this machine. This machine's awesome." So anyways, put together a bit of a plan and put the order in. I think like about a month later or so. It was about 8 weeks because it was to build, and it arrived, I believe, like a week after IMTS of 2016. And it's been just over 5 years, almost 5.5 years now I've had that machine for, and it's been a game changer. I can definitely say I probably wouldn't be where I'm at right now if I didn't have that machine, for sure. It's just really revamped the type of work we get. I ended up selling the VF4, even though it was the newer machine. I do a lot of, for one customer, these long 80-inch long parts. The VF7 was a good machine to keep for doing big parts. And I got rid of the VF2. It was pretty beat up, and just passed that one on. So I got rid of those 2 machines, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense too, with being up until recently a one-man shop. Like, at some point you can't set up 4 machines and babysit them. If they're running production, sure, maybe, but prototypes, definitely not.
No, and that's just it. I mean, if it was like, I know one guy here who runs, I think 4 or 5 machines all by himself, but it's all production.
Yeah.
He's running 10,000 parts, and that's totally understandable. But for what I do, a lot of my parts, it's like 1, 2 off, and I pretty much got my computer right next to the DMG, and I'm just back and forth, and go to the next part type of thing. So, yeah.
Well, very cool. Yeah, let's get into some questions then. We got questions
Sure.
about all of those machines and more.
Yeah.
So we had a few questions about Fusion and all of that. Metal Engineering asked, "Are you still using Fusion for 5-axis? If so, what computer are you running your toolpath calculations on? Do you use any simulation software?" And then BRC Metalworks was also asking about 5-axis programming in Fusion.
Yeah. Yep. So still using Fusion to this day. That's all I use. I do not use any other software. I lately, probably in the last maybe about 3-4 months, I've been dabbling more with the actual machine simulation side of Fusion 360. So that's just with some full 5-axis. A lot of the work I do is really just 3+2. So just being able to access a part from multiple sides. Having full simultaneous is not something I do a whole ton on, but I've been getting more and more parts that do require it. So having the machine simulation in Fusion is nice. I mean, I know it's not a full fail safe, like maybe to something maybe like Complete, which I'm not, I haven't really used before, but for the most part, I think I know the machine well enough that I know when the spindle's getting close to the table and not.
Right.
And if that's the case, I'll try and program kind of around that. But because it's a fairly large 5-axis mill, and the spindle head is large on it compared to other ones. There's 2 big rails on the back, so you got to be aware of those. But yeah, for the most part, not using any other separate simulation software right now, other than what's in Fusion, and that's just more work in progress right now.
Did you have a license of Power Mill at some point? I thought I remembered hearing that.
Yes, yeah. So I did one job with Power Mill, and that was I did a large steel impeller job, probably back, now how long's that been? I think it's been about 3-4 years since maybe about 3 years since I did that job. So that was with Power Mill. And that was the first time I've ever outsourced programming. So I used a company called DSI for that, and John runs that company, and I had his team help me with the programming. When the impeller job came up, it's one of those jobs, for me at least, it's one of those parts you generally see at trade shows.
Right.
Like, I don't know, you don't normally go into shops and see impellers running. Even when I was running that job, my DMG sales rep happened to be in the area and popped by, and he looked at my machine and he goes, "What are you running on there?" And it was running the finish, and the finishing of those was 17 hours of finishing.
Holy
And
cow!
yeah, it was like, I think total runtime was about 32 hours per part. And when he came in and he saw this thing, he's like, and then he actually, kind of clicked the bell on the job, because he had heard about this job when it was through another company where it popped up. And he was like, "You got this job." And so yeah, you don't normally see impellers quite often. So when the job came up, at least at the time, I knew I could probably say Fusion could do it now for sure. I think especially with steep and shallow and undercutting capabilities, I think I could definitely program that in Fusion. But I think at the time, it would have been difficult. And running 17 hours of full simultaneous without having any type of, simulation checking or so forth, I don't know if I would have been super comfortable with that. Even when I think it was I did almost about 20 of those impellers. And it wasn't until about the fourth or fifth part where I felt comfortable running it overnight and coming back the next morning and the machine was still going. I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's
Really cool.
Yeah.
We had questions from Rory Gillian asked, how did you acquire that job, and how nervous were you running it? So, obviously, pretty nervous for the first ones.
Yeah, it was just the customer, which was another machine shop. They just found out about me through the grapevine. I guess they were just looking around out here in the West Coast who had a machine that could do it. And as far as I was aware, there was only one other shop that could have tackled it, and they didn't want to quote it just to the complexity of it, even though it's not complexity like a Blisk. They just didn't want to tackle it on. And when the job came up, I said, yeah, let's try it out, pretty much. So, yeah, it was, I'm just going back here to the questions here. Yeah, it was nervous. Yeah, there was compared to just the job itself, the slugs were a little bit close to about 700 pounds.
Jeez.
And so they were pre-turned, and it's like, okay, so now how do you put a 700-pound reliably on the machine and hold it and machine close to 400 pounds of steel off it, and then do that again and again and again. And so I had to just kind of figure it out. So my first thing was, okay, how am I going to hold it? Well, there were threaded holes already on the bottom. So I designed a fixture that could bolt it on from the bottom. There's a key lock that it used. And then I used, I think they called it the Jurgen ball locks.
Mm-hmm.
And I used 4 Jurgen ball locks that would just mount it straight to the table. But again, like, I didn't have an overhead crane in my shop, and the slugs, because the threaded holes were on the bottom, so my customer would send me the part upside down. But then now, how do you flip 700 pounds around and then put it on there? So I pretty much designed this aluminum almost fork that would go on a forklift. And I think I've got a video of it somewhere on my Instagram, and it would pick up the fixture from the side, and you could spin the 700 pounds with a pinky finger. And you can design something in Fusion and then machine the ends and then send it to the fabrication shop. But you're like, is it going to work?
Right.
And first time we picked it up, even the fab shop, and we spun it with a finger, we're like, that's pretty neat. And so that worked out great. I could pretty much pull an impeller off, put another one on all by myself with a forklift, feeling safe moving that in maybe about 45 minutes. So it was really, to be able to swap them out was pretty neat.
I remember seeing that in Saunders' tour of your shop. You were talking about that using the center of gravity feature in Fusion. I was like, that's genius. So, I never would have thought that.
Yeah. And it's the first time and probably the last time I've ever used it right now, but that worked so well. By the time we just picked all the right properties for the weights of everything, and it worked. It worked amazingly well, actually.
Yeah. I'm actually starting to use that. I'm designing a single-sided trunnion for my 4th axis.
Okay.
Putting a Lang vise and all that on there. And so I was going to use that to basically put the center of mass of the entire assembly on the center of rotation for the fourth, so that when it's
Right.
flipping around and stuff, it's like, oh, it'll be relatively easy for it
Yeah,
to
exactly.
work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was because I saw that video and I was like, oh, it's genius. I totally forgot Fusion had that.
Yeah. 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 You don't, I don't think I know anyone who's actually used that feature outside of myself, really. So, great feature.
Yeah. So let's talk DMG. Nackerman 1993 asked, what would 2 things be that you would change about the DMG if you don't have to pay for the upgrades? How do you find that it works? And do you have a bunch of customers that keep you supplied with work, or do you quote work from new customers?
So if I could change anything off the machine, I would have bought the absolute biggest tool matrix ever.
Okay.
When I got the machine, it was, I said it was like a show special. So it only came, I think the least amount is 30 tools, but it came with a bunch of upgrades, and I was upgraded to 60. And obviously going from a half of 20 tools to 60, it's like, oh my God, 60 is like more than I'll ever need. And because I do job shop work, I'm constantly changing my tooling out. It's just constantly. It's the matrix is never empty. I'm always like, go to put a tool in. Oh no, got to pull a tool out. So I think you can do up to 180 now on that machine.
Wow.
120, 180, I would hands down like that. That's one thing I wish I could upgrade on it. And if it was something else I could get, would be a pallet changer, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. It's in the books. Probably not to put on this machine, but potentially to buy the exact same machine with their pH cell.
Very cool. I saw one of those used on KD Capital or something recently, and I was pretty impressed. Yeah. Actually, it might have been a DMU 50, but it had the pH cell.
With a pH, I think that was the pH 150. The pH 150, I think 10, and now they have the pH cell, which are the shelf systems with the big robot arm. So you can do up to, I believe, like 30 pallets on that, and in a different size. And that would probably be my next machine, I think, if anything.
Yeah, that's pretty killer. So let's see. VF7 questions. Riley Peterson asked, if the VF7 were to die today, would you replace it with another large VMC, another 5-axis, or just enjoy the room?
So I moved my shop. It's been about 2.5 years, and because we moved cities from where we originally were. So I do have a larger shop now. I mean, my previous one was about 1,800 square feet. I'm in 2,600 square feet now. So I have a lot of room kind of to expand as it is right now. That's a tough question. Like, as slow as that VF7 is, it's so versatile. In my DMG, I use the Orange Vice system on there, and I use their pull studs in a lot of big blocks of aluminum, and just mount it directly to the risers, which is awesome. But I do all that prep work on the VF7. So I just recently ran an aluminum block that was 24 by like 20 inches or so forth. Jeez. So being able to just prep that on the VF7 really easy and then move it over is really nice. Like I said, I do a lot of this one particular job, and the parts are 80-inch long. So that'd be tough if the VF7 was to really fully die out right now, what I would do, whether I would get the same one, look at DMG. I've been really happy with the DMG so far. Just with everything from just all their dealings have been great. I don't know. That's a tough question. It would, I really don't know. I just hope it doesn't happen. Let's just hope it. I mean, hey, I know it's going to happen. I think if anything, that spindle will go on that machine, and I would if that's the case, I'd probably just replace spindle and just.
Is that still the original spindle?
I think it's the second one.
That's still really good for that age.
Yeah. It's a 7,500. We never run it. The max we ever run it at is 7,000 on that machine. It sounds like it wants to go, but it's been sounding like it wants to go for probably the last 4 years. So I'll just let it sound like that.
Yep. Till it seizes up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of answered this question, but G Code Manufacturing asked, are you a fan of buying the machine for the stuff that your customers want you to make, or are you a fan of buying a machine for the parts that you want to make and going after that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, with the DMG was kind of that case. I saw where work was going. A lot of the work I was doing on the Haas could still be done on the Haas, but you're doing 3-4 setups. And I'm like, well, you're trying to hit certain tolerances. I'm like, if I can just do this in one setup, or two setups at least. Like that would cut down the time. And in doing that, when I got the DMG, I figured it was gonna open the doors up to more work. And that's exactly what it did. Like if I had just my half-sits, I never would have seen that impeller job pop up at all. There's been some other jobs that I do some big vacuum blocks. I don't like, I can't post the photos of those, but another shop used to do that for their own product. They would run it on a lathe and then they would put it onto their EC 1600. And I think they were about, it's a big union shop, but I think they were close to like 40 hours to do the part. And on the DMG, I get it down to 8 hours to do the part. So it's significant for them, significant savings throwing it on the DMG.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a tough thing. Like, I think I've seen the versatility off what the DMG has done for me. And that's why like I highly, thinking about getting another one with a pallet changer, because now that I've saved on my setup time, my downtime is just changing out the setup actually on the DMG. So if I go from 2 vices to a single vice, or, that's where my downtime is now. Whereas if I had a pallet system set up and I had like 4 vices on there, different setups, single vice, two dual station vice, so forth, like, just press a button and a second later it's like, swapped out. I mean, that would save me a ton of time. And, I do a lot of prototype work. So where I need to be at the machine, and when I go home for the day, it's sitting on the machine.
Right.
And if I had the pallets to be able to put 2 other jobs on, let those run in the evening, the easy ones, and then come back in the morning, continue the prototype work. I mean, I just get so much utilization out of the spindle on that machine. I've thought about adding an Aroa system to it. But I do just like the flexibility being right in front of the machine. And that's what's really great. That was a big thing also with the machine, was just the ergonomics of it. I think Seth was briefly talking about it in the last one. There was a machine where he didn't like the ergonomics. I think he's talking about like something popping out and hitting his leg. And I looked at before about the DMG. I remember going up to the Mazak, and the front edge came up almost to like your middle of your chest, and the table was like a foot down. And I'm thinking, if you want to get inside of the device, you really got to bend down over this wall. And I'm like, who thought of the ergonomics of this? It just doesn't make any sense. Whereas the DMG, the door slides right to the side. You've got full access off it. So it's for me, it's for the type of work I do. It's been good.
Definitely, yeah. No, that is definitely the direction that I'm heading in our business as well. Like that's why I'm building the trunnion shelf, is I'm trying to hold off on a 5-axis, because for us, we are out of power and space. So not only would it be buying a 5-axis, but it's finding a new building, and commercial real estate's not great in Tucson. Like we have a place that maybe has double the power, but we're not really sure yet. But I'm just trying to make do with what multi-axis I have, and make do until we can finally drop that. But we want a pallet changing 5-axis. So you do watch like Dennis's shop tour.
I saw it.
Yeah. You talk to any of those guys with pallet changing 5-axes, and you're like, oh, that's the way to go for prototype work. 100%.
Yeah. Dennis I talk to Dennis almost on a daily basis, and he's bugged me forever to say, get a pallet changer, like that. That's what you need. And you look at a shop, you see that's where things really are at. So
yeah, definitely. So Windmill Motorsports asked, are the majority of your job shop customers Canadian or American?
Right now, I'd probably say 95% is Canadian. 5% maybe from down the States. When we originally started the shop, I would say probably about 95% of the work we did was just Boeing work.
Oh, wow.
Just being close to Seattle, there's a lot of big shops here that do the tier 1 customers for Boeing. So they get in these huge projects, and then they go down to tier 2s like us, and sub out all like the small parts for a lot of the fixturings. And it's picked up, it's finally picked up again. Since COVID, I would probably say my aerospace work, where we pretty much dropped down to almost like 0% for 2 years. And now, probably in the last month or so, it's just ramping right up. I just went to a large aerospace shop here that does a ton of Boeing and F-35 parts, and it's unbelievable to see how much work goes through these big aerospace. Seeing $350,000 titanium forging on a table being machined with no one there is unbelievable. It blows your mind to see.
That's crazy.
But it's great to see that the work is, especially in that industry, is picking up again. Which is great. Yeah.
And then his other question was, would you benefit from a small mill like a Speedio or VF2, or is the large component manufacturing more worthwhile for you? Because it seems like that's what you've kind of specialized in.
It's more what I show. Showing a big block of aluminum on the machine is great. If I show like right now, I've got a 2x4x4 inch piece of steel on the DMG, posting a photo of that Instagram, and not so great.
Right.
But yeah, I do like a variety of sizes. I mean, right now I'm just doing a whole bunch of parts that on the DMG that would fit in your hand. So yeah, would a small machine like Speedio? I've I know Saunders has the Haas. Is it the drill mill or mill tap?
Oh yeah,
or
DT or something.
DT, yeah. Like how fast those are. That'd be great. Again, I just we don't do a huge amount of productions. We are working at, now that I have an employee, we're working at coming out with 1 or 2 products finally. And I could see right now we're just focusing on seeing if it works on the VF7. And if it can prove it on the VF7, then it'd be something that, a small machine like that would be great. I think the only thing, again, with a small machine like that is labor, right? You're going to have someone at that machine. And unless you have a setup like Dennis had, where he's got 2 Speedios and the row in the middle, which is unbelievable. It's such a cool setup.
It's the dream.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's why for me, rather than going to a small machine like that, if I went to another monoblock with a pallet system and, with 30 pallets, set up 2 tombstones for doing some small parts on or so forth, that could work quite well, because you could fit I've already had it modeled it all up. You could fit a decent sized tombstone on a 65 monoblock and get a fair amount of parts, done on it. I think the biggest thing probably, which is, as soon as you start going to things like that, it's okay, how do you deal with chips? And I know like Chris, who you interviewed a couple episodes ago, he's got those, the puck machines.
Yeah.
I
want one of those so bad.
The chip pooing machines, as we call them. Yeah. Yeah, those are great. I mean, I think if you're pumping out as much as he does, I mean, that's the best way to, kind of deal with that. But yeah, right now I would push more towards, again, a pallet system over a small machine, at least for what we're doing right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So I would be remiss if I did not talk about the elephant in the room. I honestly didn't know this was a thing. I don't know if you've shared it publicly or just privately, but you had a bunch of your friends, in air quotes, ask about your tapping problems. So, Dennis, Rob, Phil, Tom, they all, chimed in and wanted to find out, are you okay? What's going on?
Yeah. We're at WhatsApp. I think John and John have spoken. We have a WhatsApp group, and there's a few of us in there, and we're, we kind of shoot the shit per se for the most part. And whenever one of us is fuming about a job or something, it's kind of it's supposed to be a safe place, guys, that we can say things to each other and keep it. But it seems like that's not the case. But yeah, generally, if there's parts we're working on where we're running into issues and so forth, it's a great place just to, bounce it off people, because you kind of, at least for me, I'm, for the most part, in my shop, been by myself in my shop. So, when you have a question, it's like, who do you go to? So having that group has been great. And I think it was maybe 1 or 2 jobs where I had issues breaking taps. Not my fault. It was incorrect material supplied by the customer, much harder than they told me it was going to be.
Ooh.
And I kept breaking taps, not understanding why. And it wasn't until the job was delivered, they're like, oh, the material was this. And I'm like, that's why the job took double time to machine.
Oh,
yeah. But I broke multiple taps in that job. And then I think I broke one more job after that. And so Rob's got me onto these Dixie whirlers.
Yeah.
Dread whirlers and so forth. I finally just order them and I put them in the shelf, and when a drop comes up, I will have them, especially for really small stuff. So
we've just started adding a bunch of those because it saves setting up a drill and a tap.
Yep. And you like them?
I don't use the Dixie ones yet, but I've been using the Moldino brand, which is like Hitachi, Mitsubishi.
I've never heard of it. Okay, yeah.
Actually, I think John had a video on it like 5 years ago or something, or, he
Okay.
had Moldino come in and demo them, but we get them through Productivity Inc. And so far I haven't used them in much steel.
Yeah.
My business partner was bringing them from his day job, brought the idea from his day job, and they use them in stainless and all that stuff. And they work great. And
Same idea, just keeps going down, just drills and threads and that's, it's, it makes sense for the fact that if it does break, you're not stuck with a tap deep inside.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know about you, but like the engineers I work with seem to love to want thread, up to
10 times deep.
well, and like, half a millimeter from the floor, and, but there's no breakthrough allowable. And you're like, okay, great. So I have to use something like this to get that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But all right. Well, I'm glad that it's not that big of a problem like they were making it out to seem.
No. I think they were just trying to give me a hard time. That's normal.
Well, before we get on to shop news and new things, I kind of wanted to talk about general job shop philosophy that you employed. So like, are you using standardized tool lists? Do you have standard materials that you're running, so you're not really seeing a lot of variability, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, I'd say we're probably, material wise, I would say, probably about 80-90% is aluminum that we run in the shop. So for the most part, you've got your standard end mills, and they kind of last forever and they just work. Brand wise, for actual like solid carbide and so forth, I use GAR, use Destiny tool. I got put on them from Dennis, and their stuff's been really great. A little bit of Niagara and Seco as well. That's really kind of about it for kind of solid carbide. For anything inserted or special needs, for me, my go-to is Sandvik. A good friend of mine's the Western Canada sales rep here, and known him since 2002. I went to IMTS with him in 2002 when I first started working for my dad. So I've known him for some time now. Yeah, it's just pretty neat. So it's just great having that resource. I was on the phone with him this morning when I was driving, and just picking his brain about 4140 job that I'm going to be running right now. So, standard wise, we just, again, job shop, I have so much tooling. Right. Like it's my dad also was a little bit of a hoarder. He would often go to auctions and just buy so much tooling.
My first boss was just like that. Like he was only here half the year, and boxes would just show up. Nobody would he would not tell anybody. And like all of a sudden there'd just be like a bunch of boxes that showed up on the back of a UPS truck. And we're like, what is all this? And it's like, oh, it's just a box of loose tool holders, or like, oh, here's a box full of inserts for insert mills we don't have. Like, what the hell is going on?
I think I still have a drawer that is packed of inserts. I mean, a couple of years ago, I finally, right before I was getting ready to move, I'm like, there's no point moving all this carbide. Like, I'm not going to be running 1.5 inch solid carbide tooling. I'm just not going to be running that. So I think I recycled probably close to about 200-300 pounds of carbide. Just
wow.
That helped for the move.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about programming? Do you use like the container method, like Rob talks about? Do you have all your work holding modeled for the DMG?
Yeah, for the DMG, it's pretty much all modeled. For all the different devices, I pretty much have every single setup kind of separated, single station, dual station, 6-inch, 9-inch. And then it's got, all the stocks kind of already inside there. So we, based on, whatever job we're doing, we just pull it in and move the model into the stock, and kind of away we go. And the houses, we kind of, houses, majority of it is just like orange vice type of stuff. I actually, last year, we finally purchased the Pearson. We're holding one of their large vacuum tables.
Oh, awesome.
And that's been something I've wanted forever. And I just finally decided to kind of get one specifically for one of our products that we were doing, but it's been super versatile on a bunch of other stuff where we just need to do pretty flat, thin parts. It's been wild. It's been, just, no longer having to tab parts or use extra material and mill down that grab it, and, not messing around like that. It's just been big time saver for sure.
Yeah. It's a game changer for the right type of part. Like we added one. I built my own vacuum table, but I used the Pearson VPU.
Yeah.
And we added one a couple of years ago, and yeah, for the right parts, there's no beating it.
Yeah. 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 The only thing that, and again, it's my one concern with that is if you lose, now I guess if you lose air, your machine's most likely going to stop. But if the second you lose air, your part's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing that worries me a little bit about it. It's that if that was to happen.
Yeah. He's got that vac watch that I've been wanting to purchase that like will sense the vacuum, loss of vacuum and error out.
And that stops the machine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's tied into the e-stop circuit.
Yeah. I have seen that. Okay. That's probably something that I think I would probably invest in then, just for peace of mind, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The part that I run on mine most often are these giant hood grills. And man, if one of those let go while roughing, it would be bad news for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, cool. That brings us to shop news and new things. You've kind of mentioned, possible new machines. Is there anything imminent, anything that you've changed recently? Anything fun?
Not a whole lot. The biggest thing for me is, when I took over the shop, I worked by myself. And so beginning of last year, beginning of 2021, I had a co-op student actually reach out to me looking for co-op positions. And this was still fairly, during kind of like the deeper COVID side of things. And, it was really hard for, I don't think a lot of large companies were looking at hiring co-op students. And I had always wanted to hire someone, but it's just, I think it's that one big hurdle when you're a one-man shop and trying to hire your first employer is the biggest hurdle. So having a co-op student was great. So I brought him on, and I really realized, I don't like to say it's silly stuff, but like me taking out the garbage or emptying the chip bin or refilling coolant, it's things that need to be done for the shop to remain, for the productivity of the shop to remain the way it is. But I shouldn't be spending my time kind of doing that. And then having someone else do that, it's realized how much free time it's kind of set up for me. And for the odd production jobs that we get, I can finally set it up and have someone running it. So I had the co-op student for 4 months, and then when he left after his co-op was done, and I was back to doing everything myself, I'm like, no, I can't do this. So my current employee, Lauren, who I hired last year, he came from a production shop, running 2,000 to 3,000 parts at a time. And he just wanted to learn more. And I said, look, if you're looking for a shop to learn, this is a shop you're going to learn, because we are constantly doing something different. It's just a lot of self-learning. And, but you'll learn here, because things are changing fast. I think job shop environment, at least for me, it's fairly, we're constantly doing things quick. It's not like, at least the way I look at it, it's not like a production where, once it's set up, it's set time set and so forth. We'll get a customer coming in and say, I need this job. If it's a good customer, I need it yesterday. And
right.
Okay, yeah, I got to take that fixture down on this current job, but I'll get it done for you, type of thing. And so that's almost been my big thing, just learning how to utilize the employee kind of to his benefit at the same time while training him and so forth. Like I said, it's been close to about a year, and it's been great. We're just that kind of started opening up things into where's all this information kept, because when it's by myself, it's all in my head. And I first started, as soon as I had the co-op student, it's like, what jobs are we doing? I'm like, oh, everything's in my head. So yep. I started using Trello. I actually still use Trello to this day. I know Grimsmo used it, so I just said, let me take a look at it. And for us right now where we're at, it works great. It works really. We've got a couple different boards on there. One with active jobs where we can both go in and leave information for each other, which is amazing. Everything's time stamped. We've got another board, which is information. So just any type of information stuff we have, we can throw inside there. And I use Airtable for a bit of tool tracking and so forth, but everything's all kind of broken up into different areas. Mm-hmm. And I think I really needed to bring it together. And, Grimsmo talked about it recently on the podcast. He's using app Sheets, how good with Sheets. And that's what Rob's been kind of bugged me for a while to do that. So I think now is probably the right time to probably start looking down that route. Have I looked at ERP systems and so forth? Yes. Do I think that's what we need right now? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's such a, and it's funny. I've talked a lot about this. Rob and I actually talked quite a bit about it. It just doesn't seem for small shops like the right software that can help us with this. Like my biggest disconnect that I find is, so I got my big list of cabinet, I've got my tooling inside there. I can go through it and see what's missing. I make an order, we bring it, Lauren throws it into Airtable. So we've got a list of, okay, this material came in, put it into Toolbox, and then someone goes and pulls out a Toolbox, uses it, and an emerald breaks, but that Airtable doesn't get updated.
Right.
And then you just go to program a job, you look at the Airtable, oh yeah, we've got quantity 4, and you go and open the Toolbox and there's none there. And you're like, now you got to order the tool and wait, a day or two. And that for me, because we do so much different work, that disconnect of what tooling we have, that would be huge. Like ideally, I would want a tablet right at the tool station. So you pull something out, you type that tool number or scanner or whatnot, and just click -1, and boom, it's updated. And when tools come in, you can go right to that tool crib again, type it in or scan the thing and go +2 and put in the toolbox. And like having something like that, trying to figure out how to say it. If you take a tool out and put in the VF7 and you use it for a job and it's still good, how do you deal with that? So there's a lot of logistics for that, but I think, man, someone came out with a really cool kind of like non-subscription software or system that would kind of work for that would be unreal. Like I would just jump on that right away for sure.
Well, and easy too, because like the thing because I always preach, like, people at their core are lazy, and so if something like and me included, like if something stops me from accomplishing my job, it takes more than a second for me to do, I'm just not going to do it. Like I know, even if I put it in place myself and I'm like, I'm going to do this every time. And then like, I'm like, oh, I got a part that's due in, or I have to ship in 45 minutes. Everything goes out the window.
Everything goes, exactly. I mean, I'm just there with you on that. Everything goes out the window. So it has to be easy. And that's why I just like, my vision is like a tablet that's just right there, hands kind of, machine shop. I mean, we're fairly clean in our shop, but, hands get dirty stuff. So you can just come and tap on it right away and make the plus or minus thing. Like that's what I want. Honestly, if you could scan code or something, or you just type in the product number and it auto populates and you can add that in, that would be huge. If anyone, maybe there's something out there I'm not aware of. If anyone knows, please hit me up and let me know. But
I haven't seen it either, because I've gone through the same kind of look at ERP. Like I think they're really cool, but for me, I don't do anything that requires traceability for the most part. Like I've got a few customers that you need material certs or whatever, but like I'm not AS certified, I'm not ISO or anything like that. Like my customers care about, did I get parts and are they right? Like they're not like, did I get all this paperwork with them? So for me, like we just bought into paperless parts because quoting was a big thing, and having a list of jobs. Like I was like you, everything was in my head, and my business partner is now coming on full time in June. And, he would come in and be like, so what are we doing? Like what parts are on the schedule? And I'm like, oh shoot, right. I have to communicate all this. Yeah. And on top of that, I was the only one doing quoting because, I started when we were both part-time and just doing this kind of for fun and seeing where things went. And I'm the one who gained all those skills. And so now I have to like put this into a system so that he can quote too. And I'm not spending half a day quoting a big package or something like that.
Right. You said paperless parts? Is that a software or?
Yeah, it's a subscription software that does 3D model analysis. And so you load the step file or whatever in there, you train, it's kind of like an algorithm. It's all based in a mini Python script. And depending on how you set it up with your integrator, it will analyze the model. You can base it off of weight of material removed or whatever. It's very, very, I mean, I wouldn't say limitless on how you put it together, but you can kind of tailor it to however you quote currently. And then it will spit out what it thinks the best price for this part is. You can look at it real quick and be like, yeah, it looks good. Or, oh no, I need to modify the part price a little bit, and then send it out. And your customer gets a digital quote where they can see the model in 3D. And you can add, like, you can break out all the, 5, 10, 250 rather than having to do that all yourself. And it's awesome.
Would it look at, I guess it couldn't read tolerances, can it?
Not yet, from what
you have to probably upload a drawing, I guess, to go along with that for it to do that. And
you can upload drawings, and you can even you can search drawings by text that's in them. They just they don't have the smarts yet to link a drawing in a model. Like, I think they're working on it from what I understand, but that would be one thing where, you might go back in and, or have like a box where you input certain number of tolerance dimensions tighter than this, and then it would update that or something like that. But
that's the worst when you quote a job and then you get the job, like, when you send a quote to a customer and a minute later you have a PO and you're like, what did I miss?
Yep.
And then you look at it and you're like, I didn't miss, I need a boring bar for this and this and so forth. And
the cool thing is that it will analyze the models and throw flags too. So like when I throw a model in there, it'll be like, hey, you've got 5 radii that are this length to diameter ratio, or like, hey, you've got these many long drilled holes or something like that, or there's this weird feature that has sharp corners that's unmachinable. And then you can actually pick that feature, tag your customer in it and say, hey, this is a manufacturing issue. Do you want to change it? Or I can't quote it or something like that. It's really collaborative with your customers, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at it. And I think CJ over at Autodesk, he had actually mentioned this to me now that I'm just taking a look at the website here really quick. But you've been happy with it?
So far, we're, I don't know, a couple of weeks into our integration process.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm working with our guy right now. But so far, I'm really, really hopeful. Like, it seems like it's going to be a great way to make all that, unify all that information so that Brad can quote. Like last night, it was super cool. I was able to upload a model for an RFQ. You can measure right in the model in the browser. I can look at all the manufacturing warnings and stuff. Like, I've used the Fusion app for that before, but like the measuring tool in that is terrible. And, things like that. Whereas this one, I was uploading, I was measuring stuff. It gives you a bounding box. I think it has an online metals plugin that'll grab you stock prices.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So,
because like my method of quoting is generally put it into Fusion, look at the stock size, sometimes bring in my DMG model and take a look at, okay, how's the axis and so forth. So that's kind of nice if it can pull that information in. And like the pricing, so forth, can you adjust what the pricing's based off for your stock material, like say what your supplier gives you type of thing, or is it kind of a rough number?
You can base it off of whatever you want. Like, you can put in a material price, or it can pull from online metals, or, any number of things. You can base it off of just price per pound or price per kilogram or whatever.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So far, it seems very customizable. Like, I'm looking into the language more, and they give you a whole bunch of help documentation of how you want to code your inputs and all that. And I'll let you know in a couple months if it works out like I planned.
No, definitely interested in that. Because it's quoting takes time.
Yeah. Well, and like onesie twosies, when it's like 1 or 2 part numbers, I can usually do that pretty quick. It's when you get that quote from a customer, they're like, hey, here's 10 parts and I want them in 4 quantities each. And here's like my varying lead times for all. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to spend the rest of the day doing this. Like, I won't be able to do anything.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll see. But
let me know how that goes for sure.
Definitely. Well, that brings me to the last question I ask every single guest, which is, what did you research this week? And it can be anything under the sun. It's just, whatever's been popping up in Google or whatever.
Yeah. What did I research this week? Well, I researched a little bit of app sheets recently, just kind of going a little bit over that, and just tooling. This recent job that I'm doing, it's some 4140 preheat, so something I don't do a whole lot on. So just trying to figure out the tooling. There's quite a lot of tight tolerance on some of these parts, some deep bores, half a thou tolerance in some of them. So just trying to figure out what the best method is, figure out what tooling I have. Do I have some tooling to buy new stuff? So that's really about it. Like I said, I just kind of came off vacation a week ago, so just trying to get the head back into you take I always say you take one day off from the shop, and that's like taking a week off. So you take a week off, that's like taking a month off.
Right.
It's just playing catch up now. Yep.
Yeah, it's tough to get your head back in the game. It's very easy to stay in that mindset of just like, 24 hours a day thinking about it. And the second you leave that world, getting back in it, I know it's always tough for me too.
Yeah. And I specifically made sure I'm going to leave the laptop at home. But you still take your cell phone and you still get those emails popping in, and you're like, should I just do a little bit of research now or no? I'm like, no, Enjoy the Mai Tai on the beach.
Yeah. No, I took a weekend off maybe 3 weeks ago, and I brought my laptop. I was like, just in case. And of course, driving up to where we were staying, like I had a customer, send me a rush quote. I was like, all right. And I called him and I was like, hey, I will do this the second I get to the hotel, and then you're not going to hear from me for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for making the time. I know, we've been all over the place trying to get this to work.
I've been all over the place. So yeah, no, thanks for your patience. This has been great. It's been nice to finally catch up and chat with someone. And yeah, great job on the podcast there. Whenever I drive into the city and stuff like that, it's always nice just to catch up and hear, what everyone else is kind of going through. And, it's pretty cool industry. And I'm hoping that probably I hope I can make it out to IMTS this year. We'll see what September. Are you planning on going yourself? Or
I will definitely be there. So if you're there, we'll definitely have to meet up. I mean, I'm sure it's the machinists will meet up. And
it's a tough thing between that, and I think Autodesk AU is like a week or 2 weeks after that, and it's in New Orleans, which is really cool because I've never been there. So it's I'll have to see which one of those I can kind of make work, but it'd be really neat just for IMTS just to kind of go and catch up with everyone. It's been too. When was the last one? 2018.
Yeah.
2018. Yeah.
I went to that one, and I was supposed to go to 2020, and so now I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you're ready. You're ready. Yeah, right on.
So,
very cool.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all the Patreon sponsors who help support this show and make things like this happen. And I'll be back next week.